The bitter Wyoming wind howled through the gaps in Ethan Cross's cabin walls as he pushed through the door, snow clinging to his weathered coat. 3 days in Rock Springs had left him bone-tired and aching for the silence of his 40 acres. But silence was the last thing waiting for him. In the dying glow of embers he saw her, a woman's silhouette beneath his own blankets, dark hair spilled across his pillow like spilled ink. His hand found the Colt at his hip in one fluid motion, the metal cold against his palm. "Don't move," he whispered, voice cutting through the darkness. She turned slowly, revealing bronze skin and eyes that held no fear, only a fierce, desperate pride. When she spoke, her voice carried the musical cadence of Spanish mixed with something older, something that made his chest tighten with recognition. "Shoot then," she said, chin lifted in defiance, "but you'll never know why I'm here." The wind outside seemed to hold its breath. In that moment, two damaged souls faced each other across a room that would change them both forever. Stay with us to discover what happens when a man haunted by war meets a woman running from justice, and neither can walk away unchanged. Ethan kept the gun trained on her as he lit the oil lamp, golden light spilling across the small cabin. What he saw made his breath catch, not just her beauty, though that hit him like a fist to the gut. It was the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way she studied him with the same careful assessment he was giving her. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, revealing the smooth curve of her collarbone. Mud streaked her legs where her skirt had been ripped, and her feet were bare, bloodied from running across the frozen ground. But she sat in his bed, with the dignity of a queen, unflinching under his gaze. "Name's Maria Luz," she said, testing each English word carefully. "You are Ethan Cross, yes? The soldier who speaks Apache." He stiffened. Few people knew he could speak the language. Fewer still would dare mention it. "How do you know that name?" Her lips curved in a smile that held no warmth. "Men talk, especially when they drink." She shifted slightly, the movement drawing his attention to the swell of her breasts beneath the torn fabric. "I know you fought at San Carlos. I know you left the army when they made you watch innocents die." The gun wavered in his hand. Those were details no one should know, memories he'd buried deep as winter frost. "Who sent you?" "No one sends me anywhere," she said, fire flashing in her eyes. "I go where I choose. Tonight, I chose your bed." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning he wasn't ready to unpack. Outside, the storm raged stronger, rattling the shutters. She was trapped here until morning. They both were. "There's bounty hunters looking for you," he said, though it wasn't a question. Everything about her screamed trouble, from the watchful way she held herself to the small knife he could see tucked in. Her boot. "3 of them," she confirmed, led by Jake Sterling. "You know him?" Ethan's jaw tightened. Sterling, a man who'd enjoyed the killing too much, even by army standards. "What did you do?" Maria's eyes went distant. "I saved children. Your government calls it treason." Days blurred into a rhythm neither of them had expected. Maria moved through his cabin, like water finding its course, learning where he kept the coffee, how he liked his meat cooked, the way he cleaned his guns with methodical precision. She didn't ask permission, just began occupying the spaces around him with a natural grace that left him constantly aware of her presence. Watching her was becoming an obsession. The way she'd stretch in the morning light streaming through the window, arms raised above her head, the cotton of her borrowed shirt pulling tight across her breasts. How she'd hum softly in Spanish while cooking, her hips swaying to some internal melody that made his mouth go dry. "You're staring again," she said one evening, not looking up from mending his shirt. Her fingers worked the needle with delicate precision, and he found himself imagining those same fingers tracing patterns on his skin. "Hard not to," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. She glanced up, eyes dancing with mischief. In my village, when a man looks at a woman like that, it means something. What's it mean? That he's thinking about things that would make the priest blush. Heat crawled up his neck. She wasn't wrong. Every night, lying on the floor while she slept in his bed, he thought about climbing up beside her, about discovering if her skin was as soft as it looked, if she'd make those same musical sounds when he touched her that she made when she sang. The breaking point came during her 3rd week there. He'd been splitting wood outside when he heard splashing from within. Through the cabin window, he caught a glimpse of her bathing in the wooden tub he'd set by the fire. Steam rose around her like a halo, water cascading down her bronze skin as she lifted her arms to wash her long, dark hair. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache, all curves and shadows, strength wrapped in silk. When she turned slightly, he saw the full swell of her breast, the dark pink of her nipple, the way water droplets clung to her skin like pearls. He should have looked away. A gentleman would have. But Ethan Cross had never claimed to be a gentleman, and the sight of her naked in his home, comfortable and unguarded, shattered something inside him that he'd been holding on to since the war. When she emerged from her bath, wrapped in one of his shirts, hair damp and curling around her shoulders, she found him sitting at the table, cleaning his rifle, with more force than necessary. The woodpile is very well split, she observed, settling across from him. The shirt barely reached mid-thigh, and he could see the smooth expanse of her legs, still pink from the hot water. Had to work off some energy, he muttered. She smiled, slow and knowing. There are other ways to do that. That night, she didn't go to the bed. Instead, she sat beside him on the floor near the fire, close enough that he could smell the soap on her skin, feel the warmth radiating from her body. Tell me about Captain Morrison, she said quietly. Ethan's hands stilled on the gun oil rag. How do you know that name? Because I worked for him, as a translator. Her voice carried old pain, carefully controlled. He was a good man, Ethan. One of the few who tried to do right by my people. Was? The Apache knew about the attack on Mesquite Canyon 3 days before it happened. Knew there were women and children in those houses. She stared into the flames, her profile carved from shadow and gold. Morrison planned to warn them, let them escape before the raid. Ethan's blood went cold. He knew about Mesquite Canyon. The official report said they'd found only warriors. What happened? Someone told Colonel Davis that Morrison was compromised, that his translator was feeding information to the enemy. She turned to look at him, tears reflecting the firelight. They stripped Morrison of his command the night before the attack, sent him back east in disgrace. Jesus! The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Davis led the raid himself. 26 women and children died, Ethan. I could have prevented it if I'd been there to translate Morrison's warning. Instead, I was in chains, accused of being a spy. Her voice broke slightly. They're hunting me not because I betrayed America, but because I failed to betray it completely. He reached for her then, unable to stop himself. His calloused fingers traced the tear tracks on her cheek, and she leaned into his touch like a flower, seeking sunlight. I know Morrison, he said softly. Served under him at Fort Apache. He was the kind of officer who'd have done exactly what you said. Then you believe me? I believe you. The words came easier than breathing. And Sterling. He was Davis's man. When Morrison started asking questions about what really happened at Mesquite Canyon, Davis sent Sterling to make sure I never had the chance to tell the truth. She covered his hand with hers, fingers intertwining. They think if they kill me, Morrison will stop digging. Will he? Maria's smile was fierce. Morrison loved his Apache wife more than life itself. He won't stop until everyone knows what Davis did to her people, to our people. I won't let them take you, Ethan said, the words emerging like a vow. Something shifted in Maria's eyes, surprise, hope, and something deeper that made his pulse quicken. You would fight for me? A woman you barely know. I know enough. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, feeling her shiver under his touch. I know you saved children at the cost of your own freedom. I know you've been running for months, and you could have kept running past my door. But you chose to trust me. I chose more than that, she whispered. The admission hung between them like a lit fuse. When she leaned forward, closing the distance between them, Ethan was lost. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of desperation and desire, months of careful distance finally breaking down. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer as he cradled her face in his palms. She was warm and soft and alive in a way that made every cold, lonely night of the past 5 years seem like preparation for this moment. Maria, he breathed against her mouth, and she answered by nipping at his lower lip, drawing a groan from somewhere deep in his chest. They moved together, as if choreographed by need itself. His hands found the buttons of the shirt she wore, his shirt, while she worked the buckle of his gun belt with trembling fingers. When the leather hit the floor with a soft thud, she looked up at him with eyes dark as midnight. She pulled the shirt over her head, revealing herself in the firelight. Her skin was golden bronze, marked here and there with small scars that told stories of a hard life. But she was beautiful, achingly, perfectly beautiful, and when she reached for him, he was powerless to resist. They came together on the thick rug before the fire, hands exploring, mouths tasting, bodies learning the rhythm that felt as old as time itself. She was responsive in his arms, arching against him when he found the sensitive spot at the base of her throat, crying out his name when he traced patterns with his tongue across her heated skin. When he finally moved above her, she welcomed him with a gasp that was part pain, part pleasure, wholly right. They moved together slowly at first, then with increasing urgency as the fire between them built to an inferno. Ethan, she whispered, and he felt her body tighten around him, felt her nails dig into his shoulders as release claimed her. The sound of his name on her lips in that moment of surrender pushed him over the edge, and he buried his face in her neck, breathing her name like a prayer. Afterward, they lay entwined in the flickering light, her head on his chest, his fingers combing through her long hair. Outside, the wind had gentled to a whisper, as if the storm, too, had found its peace. Whatever comes, he said into the quiet, we'll face it together. She lifted her head to look at him, and in her eyes he saw his own truth reflected. This was no longer just about protection or desire. This was love, fierce and complicated, and worth fighting for. 3 days later, Ethan was checking the fence line when he saw them. 3 riders moving across the snow-covered plain with the deliberate pace of men who knew exactly where they were going. Even at a distance, he recognized Sterling's distinctive silhouette, the way the man sat his horse like he owned the world. He spurred his mount toward the cabin, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Maria was waiting on the porch when he arrived, her dark eyes already scanning the horizon. How many? She asked. 3. Sterling's with them. She nodded, her hand moving instinctively to the rifle leaning against the cabin wall. Over the past weeks, he'd taught her to shoot, and she'd proven to be a natural marksman. What do we do? We end this. He swung down from the saddle, his mind already calculating distances, sight lines, advantages. Get inside and bar the door. Don't come out unless I call for you." "No." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I won't hide while you face them alone." "Maria." "They're here for me, Ethan. This is my fight." Before he could argue, the sound of hoofbeats announced their arrival. Sterling rode into the yard, flanked by two younger men, both carrying the easy arrogance of those who'd never faced real consequences for their actions. But it was Sterling who commanded attention. Tall, lean, with pale eyes that missed nothing, and a smile that promised cruelty. "Well, well," Sterling called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Ethan Cross. Heard you'd gone soft, living out here alone. Didn't expect to find you keeping company with a wanted woman." Ethan stepped forward, positioning himself between Sterling and Maria. "State your business and ride on." "My business is with the lovely Maria Luz." Sterling's gaze shifted to her, and Ethan saw something predatory flicker in those pale eyes. "Been looking for you for months, sweetheart. You've led us quite a chase." "I'm not going with you," Maria said, her voice steady despite the tremor Ethan could see in her hands. Sterling laughed, the sound harsh as winter wind. "Oh, but you are. Dead or alive, the bounty's the same to me, though alive would be more entertaining." The threat in those words made Ethan's vision go red at the edges. "Touch her and die, Sterling." Big words from a man who ran away from the army. Sterling's hand drifted toward his sidearm. "Tell you what, Cross. Walk away now, and we'll make it quick for both of you. Interfere, and I'll make sure she knows exactly what kind of man you really are before I put a bullet in her pretty head." Ethan felt Maria step up beside him, felt the warmth of her presence like an anchor in the storm of his rage. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. "Last chance," Sterling said, his hand now resting on his gun butt. "Go to hell," Ethan replied. The silence stretched like a bowstring before it snapped. Sterling went for his gun first, but Ethan was already moving. 5 years of frontier survival, honing his reflexes to a razor's edge. The Colt cleared leather and spoke thunder, the shot taking Sterling high in the chest and spinning him from his saddle. The other two men were slower to react, confusion costing them precious seconds. Maria's rifle cracked once, twice, dropping the man on the left. The third rider wheeled his horse, trying to flee, but Ethan's second shot found him before he'd gone 10 yards. The sudden silence after the gunfire was deafening, broken only by the nervous snorting of the riderless horses and Sterling's labored breathing. The man lay in the snow, blood spreading like spilled wine beneath him, his pale eyes fixed on the gray sky above. Ethan approached cautiously, gun trained on the fallen man. Sterling's breathing was shallow, each exhalation sending up small puffs of vapor that dissipated quickly in the cold air. "Should have minded your own business," Sterling wheezed. "Should have left her alone," Ethan replied. Sterling's laugh turned into a cough that brought up blood. "Others will come. Davis won't let this stand." "Let them come." But Sterling was already gone, his pale eyes staring sightlessly at nothing. Ethan holstered his weapon and turned to find Maria standing beside him, her rifle still in her hands, her face pale but resolute. "It's not over," she said quietly. "He was right about Davis." Ethan nodded, already thinking ahead to what would need to be done. The bodies would have to be dealt with, the horses turned loose, evidence buried deep, and then they would have to run. Both of them now, marked by association and deed. "I know a place in California," he said. "Friend of mine from the war owns a ranch there. He'll give us new names, papers if we need them." Maria looked around the cabin that had been their sanctuary, her eyes lingering on the windows that had framed so many quiet mornings, the porch where they'd watched the sun set over their temporary paradise. Can we be happy there? She asked. We can try. She nodded, turning her back on the dead men and the life they represented. Then let's go. 6 months later, under the California sun that painted the hills gold and green, they found something neither had expected when they fled Wyoming in the dead of winter. Peace. Maria worked beside him in the vineyard his friend had given them to manage, her hands sure among the vines, her laughter carrying on the warm breeze. The nightmares came less frequently now, for both of them. The weight of the past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer threatened to crush them beneath its burden. Some evenings when the work was done and the wine had loosened his tongue, Ethan would tell her about the man he'd been before the war. Young, idealistic, certain of right and wrong. And she would speak of her village, of children who would grow up free because of the choice she'd made to save them, even at the cost of her own safety. They had new names now, new papers, a new life built on the foundation of their shared truth. But when she looked at him across their small table, or when he held her in their bed as dawn painted the eastern mountains, they were still Ethan and Maria, two damaged souls who had found healing in each other. The past would always be with them, written in the scars they bore and the caution that never quite left their eyes. But the future stretched ahead like an open road, full of possibility and promise. On their wedding day, as the sun set behind the California mountains, Maria whispered against his ear, "We made it." And for the first time in years, Ethan Cross believed in tomorrow. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't conquering our demons. It's learning to live with them while building something beautiful from the ashes of what we've lost. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe for more tales from the frontier, where love and redemption walk hand in hand with danger and desire.